YouTube? I'm back. Guess I'm gonna do part 2. Do have chance because tomorrow I am gonna do the Super Bowl prediction, and then I will be unavailable for the next 3 to 4 days. I got my work schedule, and they kind of messed up mine's and 9 other people's working schedules. So you're gonna be scratching your head like, it's already been 2 or 3 days since I've made YouTube videos. But when they gave me my new schedule, it's gonna be like 3 or 4 days that you won't even see me do a YouTube video unless I can fit it in. Like, it'll be like my last job at the Grove. And a lot of y'all probably want to know why I don't ever tell you the name of the place of where I work at. Because it's company policy, whether you're a current employee or a former employee, you don't want people to watch your social media. You don't want them to find out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram that you in there talking, and then what if you go back to them to get rehired and somebody snitch on you? Then you lose all your employment and all your rights, and you really don't want that. Now, anyway, that's not why you're watching this YouTube video. You watched the video because you're curious on why I call the video Sex Game, Television and Film versus Filmmakers and Writers. Now, like I was saying, we pick up where I left off. Just imagine if Steven Spielberg was asked to direct any of those big-time Hollywood films. Just imagine if they could not afford to get Joss Whedon and they had to settle for someone like Steven Spielberg. And this is why he doesn't do those types of films. See, Steven Spielberg is someone who's been in the game for like 50 years and has directed things that you see on TV to this very day. Like, he is the executive producer of all the Jurassic Park films. He directed the original 3, and he's the executive producer of those films. You all know he was supposed to do Transformers. He gave it to Michael Bay because he didn't want the big responsibility of those movies failing at the box office, because he knew that if he directed 4 films, that was a big challenge. And they're still trying to get him to do those films, but he serves as an executive producer. And if he was to direct a Transformer film, and I'm not saying Steven Spielberg couldn't do it, but as co-director, he might be able to make those movies understandable for normal audiences. Imagine if George Lucas took on the challenge of making Iron Man 1 or Iron Man 2 or Iron Man 3 instead of Jon Favreau. When people ask how come these directors don't come in and do these types of movies, it's for obvious reasons. The studios has a lot of power, a lot of control, and if they can't do the movie and the creative vision that the way they want to express the movie as a director, then they don't want to do those types of films. Like, 20 years ago, nobody knew how true it was they were going to have James Cameron come in and direct an X-Men film. Like, I'm not making this up. There were stories from 20 years ago that he was going to direct an X-Men film. And what happened was he was more interested in Spider-Man than X-Men. And that's how Bryan Singer popped up and directed the X-Men films. Now, the X-Men films are better just the way they was when Bryan Singer directed those films. What I'm trying to say and explain to you is that it's like in the rap industry, right? Rap artists complain they can't say the stuff they want to say on record because, the studios don't like when they say things that tell the truth. They start censoring these rap artists. Anytime somebody go on an album and talk about the corruption and how the world's messed up, you notice their songs get edited, and then when you listen to the song when it come out, it's nothing what the rap artist intended. So it's been happening in the music game for a long time. And then now you're seeing it start to affect television and film, because now you see filmmakers are complaining that every time they direct a movie, someone goes into the studios mysteriously, allegedly, whether there's proof of evidence or not, and to make a long story short, they can't recognize they work on film. The reason why I say that is because it's true. Now, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, they could have given you Iron Man. They could have given you Captain America. They could have given you Thor. I mean, they're good enough that they could have done it. James Cameron could have actually done Transformers. If you look at how he done Terminator 1 and 2, realistically, practically, James Cameron could have actually given you 3 or 4 films of Transformers. It actually could have been pulled off. Imagine if they got someone like Steven Spielberg to do Captain America. It could have been done because Steven Spielberg loves to direct movies about war. You could have done Captain America. Iron Man, that could have been done by James Cameron as well because he understands futuristic technology, he understands robots. It could have happened. And imagine if Peter Jackson came in and directed Thor. He understands mythology and he understands lore of mythology and magic. Peter Jackson could have made Thor the same way you would make the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies. And the reason why you don't see these directors direct movies like that is because these guys understand from a creative vision. If the studios, if the executives do not like what they see on film, they don't want to put it out into production. You know, the average movie production can cost literally thousands and thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars. And when you start wasting money in the budget, you know, you got to cut costs, you got to fire people, you got to hire new people, fire writers, hire new writers. All of that costs money. None of that's for free. None of that is for free. Somebody has to take out their checkbook and somebody has to come up with the money to finance this movie and to go out and get a cast director to cast all the people you see in these movies. You got to pay these actors big time cash. So that's where one of your problems start up. If the person has an ego, they may not want to be in your movie because they're not getting paid, you know, $250,000 or they're not getting paid $350,000. Because sometimes an actor will say, well, I want $1 million or I want $250 million. And the studios be like, you've lost your mind, you've gone on saying, get out of here. And go find another actor to play that character. That also happens behind the scenes. And none of us ever seem to sit down and think about it. Like Doctor Strange, right? Once upon a time, the guy who played the Joker could have played Doctor Strange. So you have to understand that when they can't do a character or a movie the way they intended it to be, it just creates chaos. That's why a lot of times when these movies come out, you be like, what happened? Why this director just did one movie and quit? Because the expectations is high. I would describe directors like basketball and football coaches. For those that love basketball and football, you understand the concept of where I'm coming from. Anytime a basketball coach fails to take a team to the playoffs, or you make it to the playoffs but you lose in the NBA Finals, somewhere down the line you're going to get fired because the expectation was to make it to the NBA Finals. Same thing if you're a football coach. They don't blame the football player, they blame the football coach. And the coach is the one who gets fired. If the talent doesn't like the football coach, they'll accommodate the star of the movie or television show to get rid of the director. If it's sports, they'll get rid of the coach to accommodate the talent of the star of the movie or television show. So you see the similarities in both professions. Now they're both different professions by themselves, but you see there are a lot of similarities. The director gets fired because the movie was supposed to be is supposed to have $1,000 budget, and he had only $250,000 available, and the movie is supposed to gross and generate anywhere between $1 million to possibly $250 million. And when you get a movie that makes $50 million or $70 million or $90 million, and it doesn't even come close to what its estimates worth is supposed to be, you get fired. Basketball or football, you fail to take them to the NBA Finals or the Super Bowl, and it happens 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you get fired and you get replaced. So when people be saying, how come Peter Jackson don't try to do this or that, it's because he understands that it's a big responsibility to come in and direct those types of movies. And when you hear that the directors can't do what they want to do, that complicates the problem. Now let's get to the writers. The writers also experience the same problem, the same frustration. The writers can't just write Iron Man to just go fly off and fight someone. There has to be a story. Something has to make sense. And if the producer don't like the script, a lot of times that writer would have to write another script. And sometimes you could write 2 scripts, 3 scripts, and they don't like none of the scripts, and then they bring in what they call a studio's writer. They have their own set of writers. And then you get what they call a studio version of the same movie, and a person who was hired to write that particular version. And a lot of times the writers feel like I'm being misrepresentative, and sometimes they accidentally, by accident, not all screenwriters do this in Hollywood, so don't twist my words and misconstrue what I say. Some writers, not all in Hollywood, sometimes take their own ideas and invest it into the movies and accidentally mess up the whole concept of the purpose of the storytelling. So you have a situation where it's creative mind vision and storytelling versus the interest of money production. The money's there. The problem is if you make a movie that's supposed to make more than what it's supposed to make, and it fails and underperforms at the box office, and no one's coming to watch the movie, someone has to get blamed. And most of the time, director gets blamed, screenwriter gets blamed, and those people get fired. Even if the director tried to give out 5 reasons on why that concept never worked, that director still faces employment and termination. It's like you come to work, your boss don't want to hear you were late 5 times, you're fired. And what do you think directors go through? What do you think screenwriters experience? They work and they still get rejected. And then 6 months later, they might go to another studios. And the same thing repeats itself all over again. So, it repeats itself. So people can't be surprised or shocked that this video is explaining what happens. Now you look at somebody like Robert Rodriguez. I've spoken about him briefly in the last video, or should I say 2 videos ago. He has his own production company where he has the power, he has the control, and he decides what is going to be the final product of his movies. Well, every time you see a Robert Rodriguez production, what do you see Robert Rodriguez do? Robert Rodriguez is the producer with the checkbook out to pay the actors in the movies. Robert Rodriguez is the writer. He is the director. He is the cast director. He does it all. If he needs help, he get on the phone and call his best friend, Quentin Tarantino, and the two, they decide who gets to be in their movies. Now, Tarantino sometimes will work with a studios. Robert Rodriguez prefers to be his own company. And he's a genius because he's the only one in Hollywood to successfully do what other directors talk about doing, but has not been able to do 10, 15, 20 years. To have that kind of power where you hardly ever answer to a studios. Now, in the beginning of Robert Rodriguez's career, he actually did have the answer to the studios. I think his first 4 or 5 films, he had the answer to someone. It didn't just happen right away. It took him like almost 2 decades to get to the level that I'm talking about. And the reason why, when you hear the name Robert Rodriguez, he's on the same level as George Lucas, Steven Spielberg. He's on that level. The guy has his own cable network. What other person in Hollywood has ever done that? That inspires people to want to be a filmmaker and say, I want to be like George Lucas. I want to be like Steven Spielberg, Wes Craven, John Carpenter. I want to be Michael Bay. I want to be Peter Jackson. I want to be these directors who are not just notorious for fighting back, but known for being the guy that can make a movie work when a movie doesn't work. See, Robert Rodriguez takes concepts that people say can't work on a film, and he makes the impossible happen. So that's basically how this whole story goes. So it's the 4th video in the series. This will probably be the best one out of all the videos, I'm guessing. There's no guarantee that this might break 50 to 100 views. Somebody will probably like this video. Some of y'all probably might say, I don't like the video. Some of y'all might say, you didn't explain everything. So it is what it is. And until next time, peace.